Welcome to another episode of Fresh Corduroy. I'm your host, Craig Zolan. Today we are diving into what it takes to deliver world-class ski instruction at one of the biggest resorts on the planet, Vail Mountain. My guest, Greg Willis, is the Senior Director of Skier Services at Vail and has spent his career helping skiers of all ages and abilities discover the joy of learning and progressing on snow. We talk about Greg's unlikely path from Cape Cod to Colorado, how his team manages over 1,000 instructors, the evolving role of technology in ski teaching, and the mindset that makes a great ski instructor. Whether you're a lifelong skier or just curious what happens behind the scenes at a major resort, you won't want to miss this one. If you enjoy the episode, follow Fresh Corduroy on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and share it with someone who loves the mountains as much as you do. Now let's get some Fresh Corduroy with Greg Willis. All right, welcome to Fresh Corduroy. Today's guest is Greg Willis, Director of Skier Services, and I get that right, at Vail Mountain. Greg, welcome.
Craig, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Great to have you on, and I can see you've got some skis behind you, so you're gearing up and ready. Mine are still in the basement. The wax needs to be scraped, and a few other little minor tunes, but they're ready to go.
Those still have the summer wax on them.
Yeah, they all have the summer wax. I have a wall of a lot of skis for the family. I could run a small ski shop out of the basement. So before we get into all things, ski instructor and ski school life at Vail, let's talk about the Greg Willis skiing origin story. Where
Sure.
and when did you get started skiing?
Okay. Kind of a funny story, Craig, and you might kind of an unlikely story. I actually grew up in Falmouth, Massachusetts, so down on Cape Cod. So think of sand dunes and ocean, and really I was introduced to skiing at a young age when some of our cousins took us to a little resort called Eastover. I don't even think it exists anymore. It's in Western Massachusetts. Basically, there was like a lodge at the top, and you skied down to the bottom and then came back up a rope tow. And I fell in love with it. And so I asked my parents for some skis for like the next Christmas. And they actually bought me some Nordic skis. And I remember going down to this hill that we have that goes down to the lake that we grew up on, and just building jumps. And I'm like, this just isn't cutting it. Like, this isn't what I remember from my first trip to alpine ski. And so ever since that young age of, it was probably 10 or 11 years old, I've had this bug and this desire to ski. And so, once I was able to get into high school, get a little older, my parents kind of got into it as well. And we would rent a farmhouse up at Sunday River every year. We'd go in with a bunch of other family members, and we'd take turns. Some weekends would be the entire family going and just piling into this little farmhouse, and other weekends, we would go by ourselves. And we did that for a couple seasons, and I really fell in love with it. Like, I was the kid that would buy my lift tickets ahead of time. I didn't even look at the weather. And I would be out there from, opening bell to closing bell. And my parents would be like, "Are you ever coming home?" So that's kind of how I got the bug and fell in love with it. And then, in high school, I was trying to determine what was next. And I did some internships. Internships came after high school. But I was kind of poking around as what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to do something with business. But I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And we were on a family trip up to Sugarloaf in Maine. And we stopped in Kingfield at a little ski shop called Keenan's. And my dad was in there getting some boot work done. And he came back out and told me, "Hey, come on in. I want you to meet this guy. He goes to the University of Maine at Farmington. They've got this great ski industries program that ties to a business degree." And so that was kind of history. I met this gentleman who told me about the program. Next thing you know, the family and I were traveling up to Farmington, Maine to visit the school, and I was like, this is perfect. This includes everything I want to do. And in that program, you could do practicums for ski teaching, ski business, and then ski coaching. And so we had Carabassa Valley Academy there, so had an opportunity to coach some of the younger kids there. On the weekends, I taught the Bubble Cuffer program at Sugarloaf, which is their seasonal program. And then I did like a small internship with the SIA ski show in Marlborough, Massachusetts. But my big dream was to go out west, and so I decided I wanted to do a full-on internship in ski teaching. And so that's how I ended up at Beaver Creek. Came out, it was going to be a 1-year deal. I'm sure you've heard that story a million times. But landed in Beaver Creek, and at the time I hadn't even really heard of Beaver Creek. This was years ago, right? Early 90s. I wanted to go to Big Sky, Montana, or to Vail, and I landed at Beaver Creek, but I fell in love with the team there. Like, it was just a different level of passion for the sport, different level of, expectations and development as an instructor. And so I just kind of got attached to that community and essentially worked my way up. I became, 5 or 10 years in, I guess I became a supervisor, then a product manager, and then eventually the children's general manager. And that was kind of like my segue into the management side of things. And so spent, a lot of years, probably 15 years at Beaver Creek. Came over to Vail, ran the children's programs in Vail for about 4 years before I went to Keystone on the other side of the pass. And I was that was my first director job, which was really cool because it introduced me to new aspects of the business in an expanded role. I had Adventure Point tubing. In the summer, we had a bike school, which I loved. I'm a big mountain biker, so that was super cool. The guest service component kind of fell in line with that role as well. And so that gave me a little bit more experience within the company. And then an opportunity opened up back at Beaver Creek. And that's how I came back to Beaver Creek to work for Beth Howard, who's still my boss today here at Vail. And I've kind of followed her ever since. I was senior director of skier services at Beaver Creek for 4 years before coming back over to Vail to take my present role as the senior director of skier services here. So it's been a whirlwind, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Being able to tie your passions and something you're in love with to your career is pretty special.
Yeah, it is. I will say that, obviously having started this podcast, skiing is a passion of mine, and that was sort of a way of tying it. But I can say that my professional career has been in financial services, and I would say I'd be a little less passionate about it than than skiing. So I admire and am a little jealous of your career path over the years. So it's interesting. So what does senior director of skier services mean? Each one of the resorts or ski areas that you've mentioned are big. Certainly, I've never heard of Eastover. You mentioned, obviously Sunday River is a fairly large ski area. But I would imagine that having that title at Vail, Beaver Creek, Keystone is a fairly expansive operation. So tell me, like, what is that title and sort of what is your remit as it pertains to the skier services?
Yeah, so the role has shifted slightly, in the last couple of years, and then most recently this year we've made some additional changes, basically in how we're grouping certain lines of business within each resort. And so now we've created this new base experience team. So some of the components of guest service and product sales and services that I used to have are going to move under that base experience team. And the reason being is, the school here is just so large, and it requires so much attention. So now this year, my primary focus is going to be on the ski and snowboard school. So, that's a very recent change for us, and we'll see that shift in all of our destination resorts for this year, just because, it's, as far as ancillary lines of business go, it's one of our largest at our destination resorts, and it really requires, full attention. You have a large leadership team, a vast number of instructors on the team, and so, primary focus is ski and snowboard school.
And how big is that in terms of instructors and management staff?
So it fluxes a little bit from year to year, but here at Vail, it's over 1,000 instructors. Now, keep in mind that 60% of those instructors are part-time, and those are the heroes really that come in during our peak holiday periods, and they save the day when we have real high volume of lessons going out. But it's a lot to manage, as you can imagine, because there's a lot of scheduling components to it, right? There's a lot of looking ahead, making sure that we have the right staff here at the right time. And alongside those instructors, we have a huge support network of, for children's programs, we have indoor support teams. We have support teams that support our adaptive school, which is, a really fast growing part of our ski and snowboard school. We have administrative teams that kind of help with payroll and scheduling and, onboarding, all of that stuff. So it's a large operation, and it's pretty awesome to be a part of it.
Yeah, it sounds huge. It's obviously a business within a business. Um, I wanted to, sort of break the conversation into two parts, right? The first being for the guest, for the recreational skiers who are coming and looking for lessons, and then the second part, which we'll get to later, would be for instructors or aspiring instructors who think that, gee, if I followed in the Greg Willis career path footsteps, that would be awesome. And so how does one do that? So we'll get to that part later on. So let's talk about the guest experience at Vail. Like, how do you think about the different types of guests who come to Vail? Right, I've lived in the state of Colorado for a period of time. Maybe I technically was a local at one point. So there are the locals who may come that may be clients of yours, and then there may also be obviously there's a large contingent of people who view Vail as a destination resort for a vacation or a holiday. Do you look at them differently, because they want something different out of their experience or the outcomes, or are they all guests in your view and a little bit homogenous?
When I think of the guest experience, we look at every guest the same. That every guest that comes and takes a lesson with us, comes and experiences Vail Mountain, deserves the highest level experience, right? Like the highest quality. And what does it take to deliver on that, right? Like this executing at the highest level. And so within that, we do have different programs based on maybe demographics or what a guest's desired outcomes are, or what they want to experience. And so that can vary from our seasonal local programs like our Devo program, right, which is all season long, every weekend. We have a huge contingent that comes up from the Front Range every weekend, Eagle County folks coming over from Lake County. And so that's ongoing. And so, when we're looking at that guest, we're goal planning, or we're trying to understand, what they're looking to get out of the experience. We're looking a little bit longer term, right? We're looking over 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, depending on what program they're in, to kind of build out a goal plan that matches their experience. And now, when we see our destination guests that come in for the holiday, they may only be spending a half day with us. Maybe it's a beginner and it's their first experience, and they want to learn to control their speed up in our beginner area. And so we tailor that experience specific to their needs. So when we look at our product set, we try to take into consideration all of these different guests who may be joining us for lessons, and try to make sure we have a menu or an offering of products that will appeal to everybody that's out there. And so that's our goal. But at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is a premium guest experience for everybody.
And I guess the question would be, does the type of instruction differ based on I imagine the programs like the Devo? It's going to be a group of kids, I'm assuming these are kids, it's going to be 8 to 10 with a specific instructor for the duration of that time. So there's some continuity. So it is a group instruction environment. Whereas, the private lesson, probably is more attractive and more utilized by the vacationer who comes in for a week, who wants an instructor for a day or half day or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
What is the mix between private lessons and group lessons, and for the guest who's thinking about the different options available to them, what would be right for them, or given like who's the right candidate for each?
Yeah. So the mix for us, can vary depending on the time of the season that we're in. We are a very predominantly heavy private lesson school during our destination periods. That is where we see the highest demand. It doesn't mean that we're putting out, more units of lessons than we are with group lessons, but when you compare us to, I think, many other schools out there, you'll see that private lesson experience is highly sought after. And I think the reason being is one, Vail can be overwhelming. It's a big resort, it's a big mountain, a lot of fast moving lifts. The mountain can ski or ride differently from one aspect to the next, depending on weather, wind, sun exposure. And so our guides are so tuned into that experience and can maximize a guest's time on our mountain, especially in that private lesson, curated experience where it's designed to meet exactly what you let us know that you're wanting to experience here at Vail Mountain. Now with the Devo program, like that is a consistent program, right? And so we're aiming at keeping that super fun for the kids, keeping them engaged, wanting them to come back. Our kind of mission around that is inspiring a lifelong passion for skiing and riding, and a big part of that is keeping it fun. They're doing things like scavenger hunts. They're hosting a race day one week and then maybe a bump and bash the next week, and so they'll tailor specific skills within that lesson for maybe an upcoming event or experience that they're going to have. So we try to tailor that instruction to whatever the guest is desiring. Now, if we have a lot of guests that are looking for kind of a social experience, and that's where that group lesson is awesome, right? You make all these great connections. Some of these folks become lifelong friends, right? Because they've had this great connection during their lesson experience. So it's really based on what your desires are in looking to get out of this lesson.
You use the word guide at one point in your description, you as opposed to instructor. Is that interchangeable in terms of you think of your instructors as guides and vice versa, or is there a unique role as a quote guide versus the instructors within the broader ski and snowboard school?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think some guests will, when they're making their, lesson booking with us, part of that conversation may be, hey, I'm looking for a guide. I really want to experience, the back bowls end to end in my 3 days that I'm here, and I need somebody that's going to show me how to do that. And so we'll select an instructor that will meet that guest's needs. We'll give the instructor that information. Hey, here's what this guest is looking for, to make sure that we're meeting their goals. Now, they may want some tips along the way, right? So there's still that instruction component. And so I think it's a little bit of both. It's part of being a guide. I think it's giving our guests an identity as a skier and rider, right? And that's kind of that guiding piece. And then there's the instructional piece too. Some of our instructors are so good at just sneaking in little tips here and there or little adjustments. And so a lot of these guests are learning, without a super technical focused lesson. We also have guests that are, hey, I want, this is how I learn, this is how I process. I want the technique. I want you to break it down, starting at my ankles, all the way up through my hips, and I want to know the ins and outs of technique. And so we can tailor that experience as well. So it's really based on what you, as a guest, tell us you're looking for in the lesson, and then we'll make it happen.
Yeah, perfect segue. How do you do that instructor matchmaking, right? How do you match the instructor with the guest, and what do you say to the guest to help in that process to make it as successful as possible?
Yeah, it starts with a conversation with either our ski and snowboard school reservation team or our product sales and services team to really capture the details, especially on a private lesson, right? Because we want that to be a very unique experience to suit your needs or your desires. And so we try to capture as much of that in the comments, in the booking comments as we can, to give the management team that's going to actually assign the lesson a good understanding of what this guest hopes to get out of their experience. We're also lucky that we have a strong retention rate, both on the instructor side and the management side. So they know this staff very intimately, and they know what they excel at, where they may specialize, who has a passion for children, who has adaptive certifications. We also track all of that in our system, so we can look and see at what an instructor's credentials look like, whether it's certifications, whether it's they're crossover trained in multiple disciplines, they're adaptive certified. And so that kind of helps us make the connection and narrow the pool of instructors that may be eligible to teach a certain lesson down. And then the manager kind of makes the final decision based on schedule, based on guest needs and guest request.
So for the guests, they really should be vocal about what it is they're looking to get out of the program, and a bit more detailed and specific about who they are and their personal preferences and styles, if you will.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The more we can, learn about our guests, the better. And the instructor is going to do that as well. They're going to start the day with a verbal assessment, some goal setting, trying to understand, prior experiences a guest may have had, other sports that may correlate to skiing and snowboarding that they can use to help with instruction. So that's a big part of it as well, and that's how they'll design their lesson plan. That's what they're great at.
Obviously, there's the Devo team, which is throughout the season, and then there are others that are there for a specific holiday. But for those that can quote time and plan either their trip and or lessons, which may mean having lessons at their home mountain and then having more lessons once they arrive at Vail. How would you suggest a guest sort of think about that from a planning perspective from for a guest, i.e. maybe I should start taking lessons before I arrive at Vail, and then convey what it was that I was learning and working on to the instructor? Or is it the handoff it doesn't necessarily go as smoothly as one might think, and therefore they should just wait and show up at Vail and let the Vail instructors take them through the evolution or the progressions?
I think a guest could approach that either way. I do think it's very helpful if a guest, just like it is for us, right, to get those cobwebs out of the season, early season, get out and slide around a little bit, find your balance. I think that's super helpful before especially if you're coming from a small resort to a large resort. That way, you're in the right mind space, you feel physically prepared for it, but it doesn't mean you can't come out here and, have this be your first ski experience of the season or the first ski experience of your life, because we have terrain that we can tailor that experience to, so that somebody doesn't get in over their head or they feel comfortable. We want to make sure that they enjoy their time with us. I will say that, new this year for us, we'll be launching a new portion of the My Epic app, which is going to focus on the ski and snowboard school experience. And it's called the Ski and Ride School within My Epic. And so it'll launch this year at Vail, Beaver Creek, Breckenridge, and Keystone, and then we'll expand to additional resorts in the future. But the goal with this is that a guest that goes and takes a lesson at any one of our resorts in the future, the instructors will be operating in this app. And so they will be able to assign skills, talk about the terrain that they took the guest on, let us know what ability level they are, And then for the guest, it's fun because it's like this gamified experience where they can earn like unique badges at different resorts, like the Back Bowls badge at Vail, or for kids, there's some really cool ones that tie to like kids adventure zones and things like that. So as this database grows, when guests come to us, me as a Vail instructor will be able to pull this up and say, oh, Craig, it looks like you were at Stowe last weekend and, you did the front four, like amazing, and you skied with so-and-so. Like, I know that instructor, they're amazing. And so then I can kind of tailor that lesson experience before you even arrive. I know in my mind what your expectations might be, where we might want to go for terrain. And so I think this is really going to kind of revolutionize the ski and snowboard school experience.
That's very cool. Reminds me of an electronic, medical chart, right? My chart is the application that most people know. Be able to, use that and walk around with that and share that with other instructors at different resorts is, I think, super helpful, both for the guest and frankly for the ski schools themselves.
Sure.
What other things would, whether it be behind the scenes at the ski school, that would be, good for a guest to know in advance, or just something that would be surprising to them, like a piece of trivia that would be interesting for them to be aware of?
I would think of to maximize your vacation experience. You talked about what they could do to plan ahead, but I think booking ahead of time. It seems like since COVID, right after COVID, we had limited inventory available, and so word got out quickly on that, and so guests were very good about booking in advance. And since then, guests are waiting later and later in. The earlier that guests book, the better that we can schedule, the better we can ensure we have the right instructors on the schedule to meet their needs upon arrival. We'll always have instructors available. We don't turn guests away, but we can just forecast better, and we can plan for the experience a lot better if guests will book in advance. As far as cool pieces of trivia, I think one thing that's pretty unique to us is our training and the passion that our instructors have around our training. We have a lot of folks that are doing this as a second career. They were ex-CEOs or military commanders or whatever it is. And they have this passion for sharing the outdoors with guests. And one of the reasons that they choose our school is because they love the training. They may only teach with us part-time, 15 to 20 days, but they love to train with us. They love to develop themselves. They love to grow their understanding of ski and snowboard technique. And so when they're not teaching, they're taking advantage of all of our elective clinics out there. And we put out, I want to say last year was over 8,500 hours of elective training time for our instructor staff. And that, it's a combination of certification training, just general ski improvement, movement analysis, adaptive. And so I think that's a real differentiator for us. And I think it speaks to the quality of the instructors we have here. They just want to be the best that they can be.
Yeah, I will say from personal experience, having skied at Vail and hiring an instructor for the family, I learned very early on not to try and teach my wife.
Good call.
It was marital bliss is conditioned on not trying to give instruction on the ski slopes. So, but the instructor that we had for the day said something to her, which I had actually never heard at that point in time, that made it click for her, which was say it was about tipping the inside knee in to initiate the turn, and saying the outside ski will follow. So she really sort of began to really arc her turns after that, and it did do wonders for her skiing, but also she understood why I and my son, or our son, love skiing as much as we do, right? The feeling of arcing a clean turn, she didn't quite comprehend until that point in time. And then she's like, I get it now. I understand. Like I've now had the sensation and the feeling.
Breakthrough.
So she had the breakthrough from one of the Vail instructors.
Very cool.
Many years ago. And I will remember that because one, I obviously didn't give the piece of feedback, which is healthy, and she had that breakthrough. So shifting gears a little bit, in terms of, you talked about, the different types of instructors, right? Some are retired CEOs or military commanders, and then I'm sure there are others like yourself who went to college for a ski industry career and sort of went through it that way. Is there even a prototypical instructor at Vail or at the other Vail resorts businesses, and talk about that profile?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a prototypical instructor, and I think that's what makes it so unique. I think what is consistent with each one of them is that they love being out there on the hill, and they love sharing it with someone else, right? It's like, this is too good to be kept to myself. Like I need to share this. I need to show this guest how to have this breakthrough of arcing a turn for the first time and what that feels like to get on the little toe edge. And I want them to become a lifelong skier and rider. And so I think that's what makes a great instructor. And then their ability to share that passion, to be able to break it down, to be able to understand different learning styles, different motivations, right? To make sure that the guest takes away what we hope they take away from the lesson. Now we have, varying degrees of that. We have the part-timer that just does it 20 days a season, and they absolutely love it. Most of them give more than that because they love it so much, right? It's a 20-day commitment, but we can call them anytime and say, hey, we could use you over spring break. Oh, I'd love to come in. Yeah, I'll do some more days. And then we have our I guess more full-time, more certified pros, right? Our trainers. We have several members that are on the PSIA, AASI national team, right? These are folks that have dedicated their career to learning how to be the best instructor that they can be, and then sharing that with other instructors. So they're training the trainers essentially that are out there. And so, their I guess motivations may be a little different. They've made a career out of this. Some of these folks may go to the Southern Hemisphere, and they're teaching year round. Because that's what they do and that's their livelihood. So there's just varying degrees, but they all share the same passion. They just may be at different stages in their lives or different stages in their career journey, whether it be a ski and snowboard school career or a second career.
So for those in either scenario who want to get into teaching skiing or snowboarding, what is the sort of ability level that's a prerequisite? Obviously you may not make the PISA national team from the start, but you'll work towards that. So I understand that there's a growth during one's career, whether you're starting fresh out of college or fresh out of high school for that matter, or fresh out of the boardroom. Whatever the case, what would you say to people who are interested in, perhaps are saying, I didn't grow up ski racing, or I didn't grow up, in the half pipe or whatever, jumping off of cliffs, et cetera. Maybe it's not for me. Like, what would you say, like, where is it viable for somebody in terms of their ability level to get involved with a program like yourself?
So for us here at Vail Mountain, we typically say that the minimum skiing and riding standard is a level 7, right? So you're able to, for an alpine skier, you're able to make parallel turns on groomed terrain, on black runs. May not be dynamic parallel and carved all the way through the turn. There may be a little skidding in there, but you can navigate that terrain, confidently. Snowboard, similarly, you're linking carved turns on green black terrain. You can get into blue off-piste. And so that's kind of our minimum standard for a non-certified instructor. What we do see is a lot of folks come because maybe they don't meet that standard, right? They're really comfortable on blues, but they're just so into it, and I want to get there. They can come and work for us either in a support role or guest services role, product sales and services, and they get 2 free lessons every month. We also welcome them to any of our elective training. So if they have a day off, they can jump into like a level Cert 1 training with our group, right? And usually those folks will seek us out and be like, I really want to be an instructor next year. Can you find a pathway for me? And we love that. We're like, oh my gosh, yes, like let's make this happen. And so we try to invite them into any training opportunity, any development opportunity to get them to that minimal standard. So the next year they come back and they're teaching for us.
You got to love someone who has that, mindset and sort of drive to say, hey, I know I can't do it today, but, I'll work the reservation, line and
Yeah.
in the meantime, grow into the role.
Yeah, I have lift operators that will sometimes pull me aside and be like, hey, I want to be in blue next year. Let's talk. And I'm like, I love it. Let's talk, right? And let's make it happen.
What color are they? I know blue is ski instructors and yellow are the safety people. And I'm trying to think what are the other
They blue,
colors?
but they're that navy blue.
Aha. Okay. So what is the career pathway for someone? Let's assume they're not retired from the boardroom and doing this as a second career. For instance, this podcast is sort of my second career, quote, retirement planning. But for those that are looking at ski and snowboard school as a career pathway, what does that look like? And what could someone expect if they are going to pursue that?
Yeah, I think for many of our full-timers, we try to connect with them, especially as a new hire joining us, to understand where they are in their life journey. What are they looking to get out of this? Is this a 1-year stopover, or a gap between college or post-college, but before getting a job? And from there, we can kind of develop a plan for them. We have what we call our lead trainers, and they're also kind of our locker room mentors in each of our base locations. And so they're continuously checking in with these new instructors throughout the course of the year. How are you doing? Are we helping you achieve the goals that you wanted to achieve? And for some, most of our staff, non-certified year one, will get at least their level 1 certification with us in their first year. We have others that they just fall in love with it out of the gate, and they're like, hey, I want to get my level 1 and my level 2 in year one. And so we'll tailor a plan for that. Like, we love to hear that, right? We're like, okay, let's create a plan for you. Let's figure out your days off. Let's make sure that you're available to go to the trainings you need to go to. And some of those folks that thought they were only going to do it for a year, me included, right? They fall in love with it. And so it's a real community. We talked about this, I think, before we started, just how small the ski industry community is, how connected it is. A lot of friendships grow and blossom within the ski industry, and people fall in love with it.
You are right that the ski community is very small. I mean, people know if you've grown up skiing, there was someone, like you said earlier, someone that was in your group lesson that you may have stayed in touch with and is now an instructor somewhere or a race coach somewhere else. And people move about. As a result, there's a lot of connections. And it is terrific, regardless whether you're doing it for a year or for many years. It's sort of in terms of the culture and the community, how would you say, a couple things. One, you said base areas. I'm assuming you mean Vail is so large that it has multiple base areas, like was it Golden Peak and
Yes.
Lions Head and
And then
I don't
Vail
know if
Village.
Oh, in Vail. Okay. Um, and so that's probably unique unto itself. But like, how is the culture and community of such a large ski and snowboard school, both similar to and different than a much smaller resort? And like I guess talk about Vail's culture and community, and then we can talk
Yeah.
about how do you contrast it.
I think it's probably very similar. I shared that I started at Sugarloaf, right? And those connections you make in the locker room, I still have lifelong friends. Actually, when I got this job at Vail, uh, the GM of Sugarloaf and a bunch of the upper management within the ski school actually reached out. I hadn't heard from them in years, and they were like, "Congratulations, we heard you got this Vail job." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you just made my whole year, right?" Like, so those connections you make, in the locker room, in the resort, I think are so similar regardless of the size of the resort. Granted, it can be a little closer and a little tighter knit within, say, Gold Peak Adults versus, Vail Village, just because they spend so much time together. The thing about Vail is that we share instructors so much, right? Like I talked about making sure that we're matching the guest needs with our instructors' skill set. And so instructors are going back and forth every single day. And so we're very close-knit community. We just last week had our fall ski and snowboard school barbecue, right? And it's just a chance for everybody to come out, talk about how the summer was, get excited for winter. So it's those little opportunities to connect, as a community, and we try to keep that alive year round. And then throughout the winter, it's events, ongoing events. We do a lot of parties within each pod location. And then we do a lot of like resort scale events, whether it's a food event or an after hours event. So we try to keep that connection going year round.
Yeah, I mean the scale and talking about the different base areas or pods even within a base area.
Yeah.
Having I ski at a small little area in Massachusetts. During the winter, usually that's my home mountain, and sure there are two lodges, but there's only one. There's only one ski instructor meeting place, and the scale that you're talking about is almost difficult to comprehend. But interesting that you talk about the different pods and the different base areas, and presumably if a guest requests an instructor because they had them the season prior and it was at a Lion's Head last year, but they're now staying in a different area of the village, like that instructor is going to meet them in Vail Village, even though they're based out of Lion's Head, right? I mean, that
Right.
doesn't matter, correct? Okay.
Yeah, may require a bus ride or a couple of chairlift rides, but yeah, the instructor is going to get to the guest.
Got it. What in terms of the size? I mean, it must present some challenges as well, right? I mean, you talked about needing instructors during peak periods and making sure that you're appropriately staffed. I know last year, seasons episodes, I actually had the Attorney General of Colorado on, and we talked about housing issues, facing ski resort communities. And I know Vail is not immune to that in terms of finding housing for staff. I'm sure there's some other things. Like, how does that work, and how do you think about that in terms of obviously, hiring and building out a talent pool that can be within a reasonable proximity of, Vail?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is probably one of our biggest challenges, right? It's housing is limited, housing's expensive. We do our best to utilize our employee beds. We do prioritize the beds that are on this side of Dow Junction, and so there's a little story behind that, because that can sometimes be a limiter or a delay for staff to get to work. If you're on the other side of Dow Junction, which is I-70, it's between here and Beaver Creek, it can be kind of a nasty part of the interstate. and that'll be the first thing to shut down after Vail Pass because there's an accident, right? And so then buses get delayed and folks get delayed coming into work. And so we'll prioritize our employee housing for the departments that are critical to getting us open in the morning. So all of our lift operators are right here at the base of Vail Mountain. A lot of F&B right here at the base of Vail Mountain. And then, instructors will kind of fall in behind there. So we do have some beds on the other side of Dow Junction. So that can pose a problem. Like weather can pose a problem. And it's not just for instructors that are employee housing. It could be instructors that live here like myself, right? If you just get on the road too late and it's closed, that can pose a challenge. So that's a big one. We also have done our best to partner with local condo areas, property managers. So we have a pretty good list of folks that we can get our staff connected with. And I will say the past couple of years has been a little bit of a change for us where, housing, especially for our instructor staff, has really not been an issue. We've been able to get everybody in a bed that wants a bed, whether it's an employee housing bed or, through networking with the folks that we know here in the Valley. But that, is continuing to be on our radar. It's something that we are looking at all the time. We've engage in some master leases with some of our, condo associations down Valley so that we have more beds now. And so the past 2 years have been really good for us on the housing side of things.
Are there other issues that are that you're facing in terms of recruiting and retaining talent?
I think, gosh, the recruiting piece has been really strong for us in the fact that this past year we had such great retention. We had to do really limited hiring. So I feel like we're in a great place. And I don't know if it's the economy, I don't know what's going on, but, the majority of the staff we hired new to us this year are certified. So a very small population of uncertified, inexperienced. That hasn't really been a challenge for us, but what I think is probably the biggest challenge is the cost of living, just the general cost of living, whether it's rent, factoring in, your cost for food, and then having some money left over to go out and enjoy the environment that we live in. I think that's a challenge, and we do everything we can to keep our staff as busy as we can, so that we minimize that impact.
That's yeah, it would makes complete sense. I imagine it may not impact you this winter, but perhaps in the future. I don't know if you use H-1B visas or you mentioned there's some instructors who go south in our summertime to ski, and I know that there are some instructors who come north, who may hail from Chile or Argentina or Europe for that matter. I don't know if that's impacting you or not, but obviously you're not NVIDIA or Google that has,
Right.
Or an Amazon that has tens of thousands of those types of visas. But is that impacting you in any way, shape, or form?
It's in the back of my mind, not specifically the H-1 visa, but just wondering, does it stop there, or is there going to be impacts to other visas that we might use? We use an O-1 visa, which is essentially like a specialist visa, like an exceptional athlete type visa, and you have to have really high credentials to qualify for that. Could that be impacted in the future? We did see some impacts to our J1 international student visa this year for those coming out of Peru. I think there were some impacts more so to the food and beverage team, but that's something we're keeping a close eye on because they are critical to our resort, our school. We have a lot of international guests here, and having that international culture on our workforce is a big part of our success. The guests appreciate that. Having staff that can speak multiple languages goes a long way, and so that's certainly in the back of my mind.
What else? What other advice would you have for aspiring instructors, whether they be young or old?
I would say come out and do it. Don't think that it's out of reach because it's, Beaver Creek or Vail or Breckenridge or one of these large destination resorts. If it's something that you're passionate about, similar to me, there's a path for you. We have a huge focus on leadership and talent development within our organization because we have so many resorts. And we want to see talented, driven folks succeed, and we'll do everything we can to kind of make that happen for them. So even if you feel like your skill level isn't there for skiing or riding, come out, take lessons with us. 1 year of being in the resort community will change your skiing and riding ability. Even if you don't take lessons, you're going to be out there all the time because you love it, and there's great people to go out and ski and ride with who are going to teach you things, show you around the mountain, and make you a more advanced skier. But don't discount where you're at. If it's something you want to do, just make the commitment and reach out. We'll make it happen.
Sounds great. With a few minutes that we have left, how is technology being used in teaching these days? I mean, you talked about the app, which I think is very cool, and being able to track one's progression regardless of which Vail Resorts ski school program they're in. But is technology sort of impacting it, whether it's like literal technology in the palm of your hand on a phone, or whether it's something behind the scenes scheduling, or just the fact that the evolution of ski gear and call it onboard analytics or telemetrics is now within reach.
Yeah. I think beyond the in-hand technology, one area that we've seen great success in is what we have branded our Avanti Skill Zone. And so we have this Avanti Performance Center, which is up on mountain. You can essentially ski to it, click out of your bindings, and walk inside this facility. It's a repurposed kind of race hill where we used to do NASTAR, and then we had Epics Mixed Racing. Well, we have this beautiful facility up there, and the views are gorgeous. It's 360-degree windows. You're looking at the Gore Range. But in there, we've got monitors all around the walls, right? So an instructor can do video analysis on the hill with a guest, go into this facility, the Avanti Skill Zone, watch the video, get some tips. And then also in that same facility, we have these really cool kinesthetic tools that are designed to help a guest focus on specific skills indoors. And they're not quite static skills. We have these pivot boards that an alpine skier can get on. Essentially, they're Lazy Susan bearings on two boot-shaped boards, right? And the guests can feel what leg rotation feels like. And they can do that live while they're watching themselves on the video screen. They can then go outside, click into their skis, and write down into the skill zone, and the instructor can video what maybe they just worked on indoors on the kinesthetic tools, and then take another lap up. There's actually a dedicated pommel lift right there, and they can do a lap right back up to the top of the skill center, go inside, and do some more if they want. We've got slant boards in there, so guests can feel like what it feels like to be in balance. For snowboard, we've got essentially half foam rollers, right, where they can get on and feel edging skills. They can feel pivoting skills. And so we've got all these great tools in this center that are right slope side or mid-mountain that they can go in and out of to develop. And every guest that takes a lesson with us has access to that.
That's awesome. It's very cool. I don't think I've ever heard of a ski school having a facility like that. It must be one of the few in the country. Are there others that you're aware of?
I don't know. We're pretty proud of it. It was born from a dream of a couple of our instructors who were doing this with makeshift tools at an old ROSI test center up on the mountain. And then Beth was like, this sounds awesome, but it's not on brand. Like we need to do this right. And so now like we have like all these kinesthetic tools are branded and they're, they look good and they're presentable to our guests. But this really came from a passionate instructor staff that said, hey, there's some cool things that we could do out here in teaching snow sports. And so let's make this happen.
Yeah, it sounds like, so I come from a racing background, doing video analysis of ski racers is commonplace, and it's been, done for decades now. It used to be those really, really big, bulky
Yeah, right.
VHS recorders on your shoulder, and you'd video, and then you'd go in and watch, and maybe it was after the session, and the next day you'd go out and work on things that were pointed out in the video. But that, and then people got around to using iPads or other sorts of things. So be able to do that with the ski schools, guests and customers, it sounds fantastic. It's bringing it's like F1 car racing, the trickle down effect of, ultimately you'll have, carbon ceramic brakes on your cars and the like. Very cool. I had, the co-founder of Carve. I don't know if you're familiar with on the podcast last season.
I saw that. Yeah.
He was talking about how some instructors are beginning to integrate the Carve devices into their lessons and lesson plans. So it's not to replace the ski instructor, but to work as a complementary resource. And I imagine things like that will begin to creep into the program. Do you test things like that before rolling them out?
Yes. I actually went out with Jamie and team last year here and thought the product was super cool. We played around with them for a day. We do have a small inventory of the devices here in the school. A lot of our instructors will use them with their private clients, and they also use them for training. It was one of those things that, like, as soon as they saw my ski IQ out there, it was like everybody's gunning for, like, oh, I'm taking the director down. And so I'm like, all right, I'm not playing this game anymore. But like, it's a really cool piece of technology. And the fact that you can not only use it for carving, but we took it into the moguls, and it tells you things that are kind of finite in your movements that you might not catch with your eye, or maybe personally, it's like a personal coach when you're out training, you're like, ooh, I didn't realize that my edge angles were so far apart from one another, right? And so, I think more to come on that. I think they're on a great track.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to leave the listeners with before we say our goodbyes?
I would just say, like we talked about in the previous question, but follow your passion. That's how I ended up where I am. And you may not think, that there's a career path for you. But it's a pretty awesome community. The ski industry it will welcome you with open arms. If you get into the certification track, the examiners, the folks on ed staff, they're going to help shepherd you along. It's such a welcoming community. And I think if you're somebody that's passionate about the outdoors, do it. Don't hesitate. You'll fall in love with it.
Sounds great. And I guess for the guests that are listening, the potential clients of yours, book early and often.
Book early and often for our clients. Yep, you got it. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate the plug.
No problem. All right, Greg. Thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. And it looks sunny out behind you, but hopefully the snow will begin flying sometime soon.
Yeah, do your snow dance.
All right, will do. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
Yep. That's it for this episode of Fresh Corduroy. A huge thanks to Greg for joining me and sharing a look inside Vail Ski School and what makes great instruction work. If you enjoyed the episode, follow Fresh Corduroy on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and share it with a fellow skier who'd love it too.